I want to say that I'm in company of an authentic, open-hearted, wise, magical soul. I'm with Tessa Virtue.
Hello.
Thank you for being here.
What an introduction. Thank you so much.
You know what? We've said this before. Between women, we need to tell each other, and to lift each other up. And this is part of the conversation also on mental health, is to know how to lift ourselves and lift each other up as well.
And no one is better at that than you. It's a joy to be in your sphere. And I don't want to do that ping pong match of compliments.
Yeah,
but,
no, we're not going to do it.
But it's true. We do have to tell each other how we feel. And that sense of support and sense of community and sisterhood is so important. And I think by sharing how others can affect our well-being and just that open dialogue, it's so important, isn't it?
And I wish that everybody right now who's listening could look into your eyes, because the minute I met you, I saw the glitter in your eye. And I think it's something that people have seen, because they've seen you on ice, they've seen you on screen. What does that glitter mean to you? Because you have it.
Oh, that's so nice. I think it must come from a place of just feeling comfortable in my skin and with who I am, because I'm now at a place where I can present myself to the world unapologetically. I know what I stand for. I know what I value. I know the people I want to surround myself with. And they're like-minded people who are also ambitious and wanting to do big things in the world, but in a collaborative way.
People know you from the ice. They know you from the screen. Do you think they know the real Tessa?
It's a great question. I think they know a part of me. And I have to say, I'm private enough that I do keep a portion of myself and my life totally to myself and to those people that are in my inner sphere. I think that's only healthy and natural. But the part that the world does know is genuine. And of course, how would they know that? Because everyone has a persona that they present to the world. But I do think that people know me, and I think that's through the power of art and movement and being able to express yourself and be vulnerable, come from a place of sharing emotion. And I can do that in movement, and not just with my voice in interviews, but with my body on the ice.
What touches your soul the most?
Dance and movement.
Why?
Oh, there's such freedom in it. I feel, when I dance, I feel uninhibited and just like I can get lost in a moment. You have to be present when you're dancing. And I feel that when I'm dancing, but also when I watch others. I mean, there's nothing that I feel connects with the creative side of my soul more than dance.
And in figure skating, we must be honest and say that looks are important. How much pressure have you felt growing into that industry on your own looks?
There's an immense amount of pressure. And it's interesting because I can parallel that directly with a male counterpart. Everything I've done is alongside Scott. Every single training session, for the most part, every competition, every show, we do together. And it's so clear to see the emphasis on the female appearance, even more so than the males. It's been tough. And, I think there's a bit of stubborn Taurus in me, because every time I sort of received feedback or comments, or there was a negative narrative surrounding the way I looked, I sort of worked harder to be healthier, but stronger, to prove to myself and to others that you can achieve success and you can sort of reach the pinnacle while not depriving your body of nutrients, while not, being unhealthy. And it was sort of my personal mission statement, whether I realized it early on or not. It certainly came to me later that I was out to prove to young girls that you could do it. You could stand on top of the podium and be kind to your body.
That's such an amazing positive message to share. It doesn't come without struggles. So when you did have a bad day, what was that little voice saying? Because we all do.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm quite muscular naturally. And in skating, it's, you want the long, lean, balletic lines. And there's not a huge size discrepancy between Scott and me. And So it was, always the emphasis on getting smaller and taking up less space. And isn't that the common theme with young girls in general? And that was certainly magnified. And whether that's with, costumes being unflattering or focusing on this, or, even little details down to hair and makeup. It's kind of alarming when you put yourself out there. And of course you're open to criticism, but sometimes it's overwhelming when it's coming 360 degrees from all angles, and from a place of not necessarily wanting to help my career, but just wanting to bring me down.
So what would you say to the girls who are struggling? And you don't have to be an Olympic, figure skater to be struggling from this, because we all do in our own ways. What would you tell them as an advice right now?
I would say that you're enough, exactly how you are. Every curve, every hair, every freckle, every, muscle, it's perfect because it's you. And the sooner we can wake up in the morning and say, this is what I'm working with today, this is good enough, this is worthy of love and affection, and this is the instrument that's going to head out into the world and take on anything that comes our way.
And we live so quickly, and the social media comments come in at such a, torrential pace, and we feel overwhelmed. Do you ever feel overwhelmed by all that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's funny to note, you pick up a magazine or you scroll through Instagram, and you start with this enthusiasm or passion for whether it's fashion or beauty, whatever it may be, and so quickly that turns to comparing ourselves. And, it instantly almost, it's suddenly, oh, how do I compare to that body? How do I compare to that lifestyle? And I'm trying to retrain my brain to identify those messages, whether it's in the media, if it's seeing a model on Instagram or in a magazine, to understand, the lighting, the makeup, the photoshopping, everything that goes into the construct of that beauty ideal that is really non-existent. Like that, it's changed so much from its original shape, and it's evolved to really just make us feel bad about ourselves. So the sooner we can start retraining our brains to change those pathways and switch the messaging, the better.
So you just use the term retraining our brains, because in a culture that teaches us, self-hate from the get-go, how does one retrain her or his brain? Like, what do you have to do in your daily life, to actually help yourself? Do you have to make wiser decisions on what you consume? Do we become what we consume in a way?
It's a process that I'm still going through, and I'm so conscious of that, because when I have the chance to meet young girls at events, or I think about my niece who's just about to turn 5, and already at 5 years old, she's worried about her appearance. And I think just as an overall narrative, we have to change the conversation to focus on our accomplishments or things outside of the realm of body image and looks. So tasks that we can work to achieve, intellect. And for me, because it's just so close to what I've done in my life, I think the arts, and whether that's music,
so expression,
theater, everything, expression, because that takes us away from that aesthetic-based learning and being, and into a world where we can express ourselves and have an outlet. And you're right. I mean, just the way we consume things, and whether that's being more cognizant of the time we spend on social media, or maybe it's prioritizing the people we choose to follow or engage with online. And one of my favorite quotes is that we compare our behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel, and sometimes we just need that reminder, right? You never know what's going on in behind the scenes.
And I've heard, and it struck me, I've heard you say that there is no such thing as a well-balanced athlete. So what do you mean by that? Because people think, oh my God, the athletes, they have it all. They're healthy. They're leading a healthy life. They're training. They're working hard. They have it all.
Mm-hmm. Well, I used to sort of pride myself on being multidimensional in the way that I would say my identity is not a figure skater. that's not how I define myself.
How do you define yourself?
Well, I wanted to be sort of more well-rounded. I wanted to have other avenues that I was pursuing. I wanted to have a strong sort of social network of like-minded people that, I found inspiring. I wanted to be in school. I wanted to have business in my life. I wanted to do all these things, but really when you get to a certain level, it is all encompassing. It's all consuming, and it can become obsessive. I mean, every single part of my day was filtered through a lens of, will this help me win the Olympics? Will this cup of coffee help me win the Olympics? Will having sushi for lunch help me win the Olympics? I mean, it just goes on and on and on. So I think...
What do you think about now when you eat?
I wish I was training like I was before the Olympics. But
so does that come back, that little voice? I'm never going to have the Olympic body I used to have.
Yeah, but I was so conscious of that at the time. It's funny because I remember a week before we went to the Olympics, Scott and I were doing a Power Watts cycling class. And I turned to him and I said, this right here, right now, this is the best shape we'll be in our entire lives. And he looked and he said, I'm going to be in better shape after the Olympics. He said, I'm in great skating shape, but I'm going to be in different kind of shape after the games. And I thought, oh, that's, there's something beautiful to that. But I think I've really come to terms with that because with being in that physical condition came so much stress and pressure and in this weight that I welcomed and I loved for that period of my life, but I can't stay there forever.
Now you're welcoming the other type of weight.
Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, not so much on my shoulders, but I feel that it's a tangible release of just thinking, okay, this body isn't going to get me, on the Olympic podium, but it is going to embrace the next chapter of my life. And
which is,
I think, something in business. I'm so anxious to... I already am sort of pursuing that naturally in the projects I've taken on, and hopefully my MBA next year at Smith School of Business.
Aren't you still doing an undergraduate degree in psychology?
Psychology, yes, yeah.
And why psychology?
I was always drawn to how people operate and their coping mechanisms and what motivates them. And it's so applicable to any and every field, but it was natural for me to be drawn in, and particularly then later in my studies into positive psychology, which is really just living a fulfilled, content life.
When it's tough for you, how do you lift yourself up? What do you tell yourself?
I say I'm unstoppable. I have a little mantra. And for me, yeah, I will share things. So I'll call my mom and I'll open up and I'll share things. I tend to keep things close, and
people don't know this, but would you say you're an introvert or an extrovert?
Yes, I'm very much an introvert.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So it's hard for me to do that, but I do know that I feel better. How do you sort of?
For me, it's about reaching out. It's about saying, I've been there before, and I don't have to do this alone.
So recognizing a pattern.
Yes. What is our pattern? What is our little voice, the negative little voice saying when it comes up, recognizing it and saying, hey, you little one, you showed up, but I know how to tame you.
Right.
So to know yourself better, to know how, because the negative emotions, they'll always be
They're
there. It's
totally.
part of life.
But it's almost that, as you're saying that, it sounds like that intuition that we're taught to sort of ignore for such a part of our lives, right? And then I think when you come into your own and you start to trust that gut reaction, that's a really powerful
I love
shift.
it. I love it that you're bringing this up. And because you've lived the feeling of elation, of magnificence, of what it is to be a high-level athlete and winning the Olympics and all that, have you had to redefine success for yourself?
Yes. Yes. And I'm working through that now, to be honest, because forever the benchmark was being legitimately the best in the world. And that was the target. And anything less than that just was unacceptable. And
that's heavy to live with.
It's heavy. But you know what's a really neat thing? And both Scott and I have sort of commented and reflected on this. It's that the medal sitting at home in my sock drawer is not really indicative of the success that I've had.
Okay, wait.
As a person or an athlete.
Tessa Virtue is keeping her Olympic medals in her sock drawer.
I think it's in a sock right now. I don't have the case.
That says a lot.
Yeah, but that's not what it's about. And even the moment on the podium, yes, it's brilliant and beautiful, and singing "Oh Canada" is the best feeling ever. And there is that, pride. But it's so fleeting. And if the process leading up to that is tumultuous and rocky and full of angst, and if there was ever that real trouble within the partnership, I mean, none of that would have been worth it just for the gold. So if I've learned anything, it's just to be process based, and that's where the fulfillment comes. And the harder you work, the more joy, the bigger the obstacle, the more reward in it. So I'm trying to think about that as I step into the next phase of my life.
Now that you're retired since the 2018 Winter Olympics, have you slowed down?
No, not at all. I think I'm so much busier, and
because you're touring, you're
we're touring, and actually, as I was looking at my calendar, and I'm old school, I can't do anything digitally. I don't have it on my phone. I have this pencil in my schedule day to day, and it's like it's a game to me, this puzzle, to see how many things can I fit into my schedule at once. And I move these pieces around, and I'm sort of disconnected from the process until then I'm the one that has to live it out and execute all of these things that I've jam-packed into my schedule. And what is that? I think there's this sense of being busy and equating that with success or happiness.
Oh, I have chills. Thank you for bringing this up, because I'm sure that we're not the only ones feeling this way. I think we tend to overbook ourselves and feel that if we are busy, we are accomplishing.
Yes.
But at the same time, when it goes too fast, you kind of step outside of yourself.
Right.
You're not even living it.
No. So how do you slow down?
I physically slow down. I try to just take time to breathe. And even if it's 5 minutes, I really try at one point in the day to have a time for myself where I'm not moving. And when I'm trying to see everything that's going up in my mind as just thoughts, they're not mine. They're just like passing clouds.
Right.
And it gives my brain and my body a break. We all need breaks.
Yes, that's a strong visual, the clouds sort of floating away.
Yeah, I've learned that in meditation, and it really helps. By the way, we have to talk about Fit Spirit, because Tessa and I work together because Fit Spirit, which is a nonprofit organization which really encourages young Canadian girls to move, because 1 out of 2 Canadian girls will stop sports going into puberty. And that's a huge problem, and it has a huge impact on our physical and mental health as young women and women. So what do you think your truest role is with that organization? What message do you want to get across?
Well, I think it's easy for me to speak from a place of fully being able to articulate the impact that sport has had on my life. And that's to a bit of an extreme. I mean, I think at the fundamental level, it's just about getting moving, getting active in any sort of capacity. And it's so clear. I mean, there's definitive research, of course, but it's also just so clear to see in these girls the impact that it has on their lives. And talking about self-esteem, when that focus shifts from do the boys like me to how's my serve in volleyball, or what do my teammates think of me, or how do I feel about myself when I'm running? I just think that shift into being present, into feeling connected with our bodies, into all of those chemical things that actually even happen in our brain when we're moving. I think the important thing is to ensure that people have access to that. And that's what we forget, that we are so privileged, and especially in Canada, and we assume that everyone has access to these teams and knows how to work out, or knows, wants to be active. But the truth is that has changed, and
a simple walk can help you.
A simple walk.
Uphill is better.
And it's free in these schools. Just having those resources, it's so powerful to see the girls and just to understand fully how that can change the way they see themselves.
I always try to tell them, you have no idea how much better you feel after exercising than before. Even if in the middle of it, you're like, oh my God, I want to die right now. You always feel better.
Yes. And actually, the more you don't want to do it, the better you feel, right? So it's, it's so liberating. And I think that this drop-off of girls stepping away from sport and activity, it just breaks my heart for whatever reason, whether that's self-esteem, whether that's accessibility,
Sometimes you'll even hear like, oh, it's too masculine.
Right.
Because culturally that's going around.
Yeah.
But girls, we got to stick together and we got to move these, magnificent bodies that we have and know them. Because sports also allows you to know your mental capabilities.
So true. Yes. And then you start to gain that confidence and feeling like, okay, I can tackle this, and what's next for me? And it just opens up a world of options, and
it should be enjoyable too, right? It's not about a competition.
No, not
right,
at
Tessa?
all. Right. It's not.
How did you feel when Mattel came out with the Barbie in your image for the Shiro series?
Oh,
that's quite something.
It is. It still hasn't totally sunk in yet, even though I've seen the doll. And that's what's interesting is because...
Does she look like you? Do you find
Exactly. Exactly. They were so collaborative with that process. And I think that's what's the first time in my whole career where I could tangibly see something 3D in front of me that was like a little me, and I could kind of see my success in a different way. You know what I mean? I can't watch a video of my performance or feel it in the same kind of sense. So it was this way that I could disconnect but also engage with what it was that I've done on the ice. And more importantly, I can't tell you how emotional I was seeing the 20 dolls standing next to each other from all around the world. Everything from a scientist to a truck driver to a model to an athlete to, an activist. It's so neat to see that representation and the visibility for young girls.
And we should say that the Shiro series was meant to really celebrate women who are breaking barriers.
Yes.
So which barrier do you think you broke?
Oh, good question. I think there were barriers in, legitimate ones, like being the first North Americans to win the Olympics, being the youngest, being the first dance team to win at their first games.
We're still cheering.
So things like that where it just... when people see that can be done, then maybe they think differently about their own path. But what also struck me is that it's in line with Barbie's also trying to close this dream gap. And when girls are 5 years old, the research shows that they start doubting their abilities and their capabilities. And 5-year-old boys don't experience this, even though they're matched.
That's culturally a message that we send out.
Yes. And I mentioned my niece, she's about to turn 5. And just the other day, she looked in the mirror and said, "Am I beautiful?
Am I courageous? Not am I strong?
Right.
Am I beautiful?"
Yes. And that's where this narrative has to shift. And I'm conscious of that even now. We'll do meet and greets. And Scott and I are trying to, you want to connect with a young kid when they come through the line. And the instinct is to say, "Oh, look how beautiful. Oh, look at that dress." Or, "I love that headband." And you just want to create a connection. Now it has to be, "You look like you're full of confidence," or "Look at that spirit or energy," And I think little things like that, making the shift. And it's so strange to see, like my niece who's 5 and she's so pure. And I think, in what context do you even know
Did she even
that
learn
appearance is important? And she has smart parents who are, gender equal, and they're very conscious of how they talk to her, and yet still. And there can be little boys at school saying that she's chubby.
Because peer pressure and what we consume has a huge impact on the way that we construct the esteem that we think that we share with our own self.
Right.
And words are important. Language is important. So if you did have to write a letter to your 10-year-old self, what would be the core message?
The core message would be that the things you feel insecure about are actually the things that will lead you to accomplish your dreams.
And exhale.
Yeah.
Tessa, you're just wonderful. Thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you for this gift that you're sharing. Thank you for being here with us.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for being you.